the working class rising up. This is the ruling class punching down.
My day, bigger your day.
First rule of gladiator school, bro. Don't punch down.
Charging into a goblin.
Hail Trump!
The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
Control your own body.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
We can fight the entire banking system. Nobody can. But together, everybody can.
I did nothing wrong.
Hello and welcome to Did Nothing Wrong Live, the show that cuts through the noise and helps you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff Somke, and with me is Karl Folk. In today's episode, we talk about the disastrous floods in Texas and the equally disastrous decision that the federal government made about gutting FEMA, which is the main agency that deals with natural disasters in this country. We're also going to talk about the recent ICE raids and how much they've managed to escalate their tactics in the past few weeks. And we're going to talk about the idea of Fedposting and why it's something you should absolutely never do. Never, ever, ever, not even once. Thanks again for your support. Keep listening to learn more, and remember, smash those like and subscribe buttons. So, Central Texas is still digging out of the aftermath of the recent floods that killed what now look like at least 130 people and left about another 171 missing. They're still searching, but they haven't found any survivors since July 4th. And to make matters even worse, the government agency that deals with this is FEMA, or the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They let their call center contract expires. So what that means in practice is that tens of thousands of people who were trying to call for help in the aftermath of this flooding weren't actually able to reach anybody.
Yep.
And this is an especially insidious thing for them to do for at least two reasons. The first of which is that you've got people on the ground who recently had their homes, their family members, their lives absolutely upended by this thing. And FEMA generally does a very good job with disasters. It's what they do. They come in, they help provide assistance to communities to get back on their feet. So to pull that piece of the puzzle out at the time when you have the exact scenario that they were created to help deal with, that's just anti-human. And the other piece of this, I think I got to cover, is that it fits their narrative of being able to say that the government doesn't work. They can point to the lack of FEMA response and say, see, the big government bureaucracy doesn't care about you. And it's like, of course, that's what it seems like when you stop answering the phone intentionally. These were all choices that got made by people in Washington who want to convince you to lose any remaining faith that you have in the federal government's ability to fix anything that goes wrong in this country.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, this falls right into the line of kind of the right-wing hyperstitional myth, myth building system that they've done where, they're using conspiracies prior to taking power to say the federal government's broken, to say that democracy doesn't work for most people, all these things that then now they're enacting through destruction of things like FEMA, of shuttering, these call centers and all of that for exactly that reason, right? Like part of it is their anti-humanity goal, right? Like that this is going to be a socially Darwinian fight for the scraps of humanity. And the other part though is it's playing the narrative game and building part of their larger story into this myth that they're now making somewhat real, in that the government won't work.
The government won't help you.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a friend this week about it, and their take was that all of this is setting up for a massive privatization of services that we used to rightfully regard as being something that the state would provide.
Absolutely.
And I think that's pretty accurate. You only get the help that you can pay for in Trump's America, and it's cash on the barrel.
Yep.
If you can't afford to be rescued in the event of a disaster, then fuck you. Should have made better choices, or at least more financially lucrative choices.
Exactly. I mean, absolutely, that's a part of it, right? Like, this is kind of the Reagan-esque privatization push that's happened now for decades. And, I keep thinking about things like shock doctrine and disaster capitalism and all these different things that have been written about how this functions. But this is the logical next step for necropolitics and kind of the omnicidal fascist movement that we're dealing with, because their narratives are built in blood, right? And like, when you start actually getting into it, what the through line, one of the many here, but one of the big through lines between something like Make America Healthy Again and RFK's side of the movement, and then what they've done at FEMA and other places, is that they are essentially saying that the, quote, weakest in society are going to die and the strongest will rise to the top, right? This is kind of heart of darkness fascist belief. And it's been part of, this movement and some of the worst movements we've had both here and abroad ever, right? Because ultimately this is the embodiment of hard times build strong men.
Right.
And this bullshit fascist belief that the strongest in society survive and those people turn into leaders, when in reality, this is just terror.
These people
this
think
is the
they're
fascist
Sparta.
terror.
They think they have this myth that they're like the myth of Sparta, that somehow that's the kind of warrior state these people want to live in. And
exactly.
It's just not accurate and never really has been. And as I once heard it put, I think by Rick Steves, where is Sparta now?
Right, exactly.
Sparta's a big pile of fucking rocks.
Yeah. And the only reason we
Athens, know, I hear it's great.
Yeah. You can still see the Colosseum. You can still see, a whole host of Etruscan pieces that predate that even. But what you don't find is Sparta, because, warrior cultures never survive. They don't.
Right.
It's a hallmark of self-destruction at some point, and it's kind of one of those jokes, right? That like, well, we're the toughest in the country. Well, then why aren't you still here?
Yeah.
Right. And so, I think that that's really important for people to understand. This is part of this broader narrative campaign, but it's also an attempt to build some kind of mythological future based on a past that didn't actually exist.
Exactly.
Right? And like, those narratives, like I said, are written in blood, and it's in the most at-risk people in the world's blood.
Yeah.
It's the people that we as a society have tried to look out for, never done exceptionally well in this country, but we also haven't explicitly in a long time said the goal is to kill them either, right?
No.
And that doesn't mean we were doing it 100% well before, but there's a definite difference between not doing it well because either the politics or because people don't understand or because there's no ability, and literally saying the weakest are going to die, whether that's the elderly, whether that's the disabled, whether that's groups that have historically been marginalized by healthcare and a healthcare system that isn't built to help them.
Anybody they can other.
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody they can other, which is the very definition of fascism, really, when you think about it. Let's go back to a mythical past that didn't exist.
Exactly.
But we can tell our people that it did, some sort of like quasi 1950s version of America where we didn't have gay people, we didn't have trans people, black people knew where they were supposed to go on a daily basis and didn't upset us by asking for things like civil rights. That's the kind of place we want to go back to. But the thing is that never existed.
No, it didn't.
We've been very clear about that.
Yeah. And I think that the reality is, like, the more we're getting a view of this, this is a group that wants us to go back to like 1850, right? Like there's very clearly an ethnic cleansing campaign going on by ICE to rid the country of minorities they don't like. Yeah. There's clearly a move, this is all what's gone on within the federal government is a move to resegregate the federal government and broader society. Right. What we're seeing is now the push from the quote unquote intellectuals within the far right That
Richard Tanania, come on down.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Richard, step on down. There's a push now on that side for, like who is, maybe there is a class in this country of workers and things like that. And that's from Yarvin now, but like it's the same intellectual crew. And, what they're doing is they're laying out intellectual and kind of intellectual frameworks and patterns of thought that lead in one direction, right? And that's resegregation, eugenics for the most at risk, and resegregation at the highest levels. And all of those combined, I mean, this is fascism, right? And it's white supremacy, and it's all the other things that we have as part of our history, which I think is why it's been hard for certain people and groups to really say this is fascism, because they expect European, Nazi style fascism, when this is more in line with our history.
Yeah.
And our fascism was always going to look and reflect that, not these things that we think of as, Nazism or totalitarian fascism. And even, it even has reflections that like Franco, of Franco, right? But again, it's the American reflection of what Franco was.
Yeah.
And that's a real, I think these are all really important points for people to understand, that American fascism is all of these things.
Fascism with American characteristics. And this is where the whole, like, well, it's not really fascism if it's not, from the fascia region of Italy thing is just not helpful. You get these people.
In fact, it's really dangerous.
They know what they're doing when they do that kind of stuff, which is very much to minimize what they're doing, to minimize the threat that they know that they pose.
Well, and to neuter, right? Like to neuter the message and to neuter the countering message. It's what we're seeing. I mean, it's what we've seen repeatedly since 2016 with how the right uses sock accounts and networks of sock accounts and other things to sway messaging online, right? And feed bad information to people in their opposition and all these other things, because realistically, like, they know exactly what they're doing.
Oh yeah.
Ending the call centers for flood victims in Texas.
That only has one outcome. There's only one thing that's going to come from this. The amount of money that you save is negligible. As somebody who has formerly worked in call center management, I'm here to tell you it's not that expensive. But the idea that you are somehow going to save enough money to justify making people, in a lot of cases, die is insane. But this is what they're going to do, so they can point to it and say, see, FEMA couldn't help you.
Yeah.
And I mean, FEMA's been a target of theirs forever. They've been, since the 90s, they've been on the idea of FEMA camps. Like FEMA is,
I was literally about to say,
and the idea of a natural disaster and round people up and put you in camps. And now they're actually building camps.
Yeah.
But
exactly. Well, exactly.
Funding FEMA. It's weird.
And that's the thing, right? Like, this is something that I've been working on as part of the academic work, but like this use of conspiracy to inoculate their followers towards their own actions in the future is really a big part of it. And Alex Jones and the FEMA, conspiracy theories and all of this, we've seen that, right? Like, if you go to Amazon right now and you search the word FEMA camp, you're going to get things like police state 1 through 4 FEMA camps. And you're going to get shit like Alex Jones. You're going to get a whole bunch of stuff, because for literally almost 20 years now, the major, one of the major stories is FEMA is this new world order, quote unquote, plan to depopulate the planet. Right. And so now they're literally doing the thing that they said FEMA was doing. And part of that is this inoculation structure, as I've been calling it. But also part of it is they've said now for 20 years, the liberals and the Democrats have been doing this to us, so it's okay for us to do it to them. And that permission giving and inoculation now is coming to fruit. And we are going to get the worst kind of strange fruit out of this. And we already are, because the goal was always to use this as a means to both destroy federal government's capacity, but also to hurt those they
deem worthy of hurting.
Yeah.
those people that needs to get got are going to get got.
Yeah.
And we're seeing this now where the only strong federal agencies they seem to want, and the big, beautiful bill will back me up on this, are the law enforcement agencies. The people whose job it is to enforce these completely insane directives. You know, we're going to deport thousands of people a day. You know, that we're going to pay for. That will make sure we pay for, but we can't keep the call centers open when things flood. And this is the canary in the coal mine, as far as I'm concerned, because we're going into disaster season in most of this country. We are going into up here in the Northwest. We're going to get smoke. We're going to get wildfires. We're going to get a lot of heat. And, you know, there's going to be flooding in some parts of the country. There's going to be, you know, heat events. There's going to be all the usual stuff you get over the course of a summer in the era of climate change. And now they've taken away one of the main pillars to deal with it when it gets really, really bad. So if you're one of those people who lives in an affected area or an affected state, you should probably start making sure you know your neighbors. You should make sure you know the people in your immediate area. You should, if your circumstances permit, start laying in the kind of supplies that you might need in the event of something like this. Because the sad part is, with the choices that the Trump administration has made, they're not going to be there to help you. Don't expect FEMA. No. They're not going to be there.
We are going to be, people are going to be on their own.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing for people to accept, especially when that has not been the case. As much as there's been terrible response by the federal government in some cases, you know, we can look at Katrina, we can look at Helena, we can look at different things where there were real breakdowns.
But there's a difference between, like, you know, Katrina, where you've got an incompetent political appointee like Michael Brown. Heck of a job, Brownie. You've got that guy in charge of an agency that's actually trying to do their job. And somebody like Kristi Noem, who's just figured out how to dismantle the entire thing.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. And like, there's a huge, I mean, that's the difference, right? Is between kind of malignant problems and true malevolence. Right. We're going to find out. And, you know, I think the thing, looking at what happened for Helena, right? For example, last year, you know, one of the things was that eventually FEMA had to pull out because of militia actions against them by far-right groups and others. And so there are a whole host of problems here. And what we saw you know, kind of, what was that, 4 years ago during the big wildfires in California?
Oh, yeah. It was 2020, I think. Things were just crazy.
Yeah, what we saw on the West Coast was a couple different things, right? One, far-right groups had showed up and said they were there to help. Two, they were setting up perimeters and checkpoints to attack anyone they saw as a target.
Yeah.
And then they also were trying to jump in and become part of that supply chain and infrastructure chain that FEMA sets up on the ground within
we had areas. Patriot Front handing out bottled water at some of these checkpoints with their stickers.
I mean, Aryan nations doing the same thing. Other groups, right? The Threepers were doing similar. And
smart.
If you're trying to recruit, this is the stuff. And, you know, so in areas where there is a risk of whatever natural disaster, whether that's fire, whether that's hurricane, whether that's flooding, people do need to be aware that, like, now, in a similar way to having questions about who's a cop, who's not, that we're starting to have around masked secret police, we're going to have to deal with in really heightened situations where we're not going to know, and some of the safety stuff isn't going to be there that was. And these are going to be compounding problems, right? The way that I look at something like ICE and the big beautiful bill and what it did is it's compounding 1,000 problems. It's also giving a budget that's larger than a lot of the U.S. military to a domestic police force engaged in ethnic cleansing. And like I've said very clearly here and in other places, that you know, it's a declaration of war in a very intentional way.
Yeah. Make no
And
mistake, they
this-
see you as the enemy. You
They
are
do.
the enemy.
And if you're in a blue state where a disaster happens, they are going to use that as a means to wage asymmetrical battle against
They are.
you, right?
They are.
And so when we're talking about it in that way, we have to be, people need to be pretty clear, like, this is auto genocide.
Yeah.
Right. Like they like, in addition to them doing actual ethnic cleansing at the barrel of a gun, which we're seeing in California and other places, this is an attempted auto genocide, right? Whether that's by making us sick via gutting all food regulation or gutting FEMA and removing the ability for you to say, hey, we have a disaster here, we need help. These are all parts of that larger, broader move to enact a lot of the things that the Republican Party has talked about now for 30 plus years in differing capacities. And sometimes under the guise of like better business and, small government and some of the stuff that, has been kind of libertarian coded.
Yeah.
But the reality is the Trump administration this time around is very much just clearly articulating its goal.
Yeah.
And its goal is to functionally make this country unsafe at a level it hasn't been in 150 years.
Yeah.
And that plus their other stated goals. And the fact that much of the pan-right movement behind Trump has, at differing points and different capacities, said that these areas, now that we see troops on the ground, are enemy territory, quote unquote, to be, quote, conquered. We're starting to see that this is just a clear kind of white power colonial capital move, but also that's what fascism is ultimately, right? And so I think people need to be very clear on this. Like, this is fascism.
Mhm.
We're living under fascism. There's no democracy here right now. There might be in the area you live in that city or that state, but that's not extending upward to the highest level.
And I mean, for all of those people who find themselves like a little concerned about the branding of fascism at this point, and I think there's probably about 3 of you left, but you want to say like, okay, remember that old quote from Sinclair Lewis about how when fascism comes to America, it'll be wrapped in the cross and carrying, the Bible?
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking at here. We are wrapped in the flag, carrying the cross. This is the kind of fascism that the DOD is releasing, recruitment videos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Explicitly quotes from the Bible.
There's a Bible verse I think about sometimes, many times. It goes, "And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? And who will go for us?"
Been rolling on for a long time, rolling on for a long time. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down.
And I said, "Here am I. Send me."
Through your rock and hide your head. Working in the dark as your fellow man. Shirts gotta lay black and white. It's time to dark, be brought to light. You've been running on for a long time. Run on for a long time. You can run on for a long time. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down.
Yeah, like I've never seen anything like it in this country, right? Like, it's theocratic revolutionary propaganda, basically telling you to go into service for your country to kill for God.
They used to pretend that it wasn't like that.
Yeah, well, and
stopped.
I think, I think I think some of this is just stripping away of the language of democracy, but some of this also is an overt. That propaganda stopped me dead in my tracks.
Yeah.
Right? Like, when I watched that, I nearly fell over, because really, you're not going to get much more clear signs of what has happened and what continues to happen here than U.S. government-funded internal propaganda that says, come work for us to kill for God.
Yeah.
That is the heart of white nationalist, Christian nationalist, Christian fascist belief, right? Like that you're a crusader.
Yeah. And we have seen that mentality, that crusader mentality almost start to escalate.
Yeah.
Definitely on the part of ICE. And, you can tell it's going to happen because the one thing they always still seem to have money for in this
and
country
in fact,
is
like
ICE
they're
raids.
actively looking
We've
for
seen
reasons
a massive
to come
escalation
after, right?
in the
And
amount
like,
that they're doing. And
yeah,
a more
one
cavalier
of the
attitude
things that I've been
towards
talking
collateral
to a
human
few
damage. I mean, it was
the
reported
people that I know
Thursday that a man named Jaime Garcia died as a result of injuries that he
most of these
suffered
lists that
during a fall
Palantir
on an
and some
ice
of
raid
the
in a
other
farm in
companies are
Ventura,
starting to
California.
compile
And now the
are
hospital is
coming
actually
from
reporting
literal
that he's alive. Every media outlet,
right?
in
So like
his
if you've
union,
ever
the
been
farm
on
workers
an
union,
Antifa
etc.,
watch,
everybody had it that he had died.
member of
He did
an
not
Antifa
die. He
watch
is apparently
list
still
here. I know
alive. He's
you
got a
are as
broken
well,
neck and a
and I know
broken
some
back.
others
He's in
that we
critical condition.
regularly talk with
That
on
could
here
change.
are.
But
That's already
at
been fed
first,
to them,
the response was they
right?
killed
And
somebody.
like the info,
And
right?
it
I mean,
went
that was my
ham
response,
on-
right?
right.
Like yesterday
Antifa
when
Watch
that
isn't
broke,
good info,
I mean, the
but it
response
is
is the
info.
Gestapo killed this guy.
Right.
It's not usually accurate. But that is a really tough one, right? Like, right? Because this is highly emotionally. This is going to get much bad information environment, right? And people are, what sharing stuff from really well-known sources like New Orleans that are very well vetted traditionally. And I mean, when you have personal references coming out, when you have the union reps starting to talk about it, all this, that's usually a sure sign that something's happened. Now we're finding out it didn't. And, this is
and that's what you're going to see more of. These people are going to get got too. These people are going to get got. They're going to miss stuff the same way that, everybody else does, because there is simply so much bad information out there. Right now.
Both intentional and unintentional bad information.
Right. So it becomes even more critical right now to take an extra few minutes, take an extra few days if you need to. You don't always have to hit share. You don't always have to, circulate that particular thing. I mean, it's tempting to play into that, but at the same time, it is more important than ever. People that are out there, participating in this have to vet their sources. And in some cases, even the good sources are wrong.
And that's, I think, the tough one with this one, right? Is like, I know for myself, when I shared that story, it was coming from the farm workers union, right? And
totally defensible.
That is a source that is the source that you would usually take when you're looking for good information. The fog of war is real. Like, there's no other way to put this, right? And because this is both an information war and an escalating kind of low kinetic gray war, however we want to phrase what's happening on the ground, that rule is true here, right? And what we've seen around this is the injection of really bad info. And that's where we have to really slow down, right? Because it's going to lead to things like, I mean, I'm seeing a resurgence of Rebecca Jones. Right? And it's this whole thing where people are snapping to things that they shouldn't be.
Right. And there are bad actors on both sides. There are people who are definitely grifting on what we think of as the left. And we've talked about that on a number of occasions before, that, it does open things up for, the Becky Jones, for the, what's the guy that looks like an ostrich whose name I can't ever remember? Anyway, the people who just have a vested interest in figuring out how to pay their bills by going along with this kind of stuff. And you find yourself thinking this is not going to lead anywhere good, but the information environment that prioritizes, amygdala, that shares, the jumping on things and, just immediately blasting them out there, is leading to this kind of thing.
Right. And I mean, this isn't new, right? Like, this is something that's been talked about excessively for almost a decade now. And it's a different environment purely in the fact that we don't really have the media sources we did even 5 years ago, let alone a decade ago, that were able and willing to fact check. And, this goes to conversations that have been had across, the kind of counter-authoritarian, both academic and research world, is that, part of the thing that happened as kind of pushback or blowback to 2016 was that fact checking was destroyed.
Right.
And then was recreated kind of as this corporate entity outside of the control of actual experts or academics or those with a fact-checking background, whether that's in the news capacity or just in the more traditional roles that people in fact-checking play, whether that's editing books or editing a news article and then saying this is based on good science or based on good known fact and not.
Yeah.
And there are a whole bunch of compounding factors here, right? And some are totally intentional, as we've seen, whether that's the buyout of news media by billionaires who are friendly to what's happening, and others are more just kind of, almost network effects of social media spaces that have not just given up on the ability to kind of parse what is real and what isn't, but have in fact monetized the bad information because it draws more clicks, it draws more, kind of the attention economy is built now around that versus the sharing of good information slowly. And so we're seeing all of the stuff that, people had warned about, written books and hundreds of thousands of words about over the last, few years really come to bear in these moments. And, that kind of gray zone, low intensity information war is now kind of underpinning the actual thing, which is kind of this low level simmering violence.
Right. And I mean, there was a Canadian cultural theorist that most people are probably familiar with, a guy named Marshall McLuhan, in 1970. He famously predicted that World War III, when it comes, will be, quote, a guerrilla information war with no division between military and civilian participation, unquote.
Yeah, it's a quote. I mean, that's literally a quote that I've had
in 1970.
Yeah, I have that over my credenza here in a small little one, because it's true, right? Yeah. And like that's also a hallmark for far right movements, right? Is this kind of like asymmetrical, small grade, decentralized insurgency against, what we've seen is against society, but in the information spaces. I mean, it's trolling, it's the creation of networks of fake accounts and real accounts. It's all of this stuff that we saw kind of create what we call MAGA now. Like the quote MAGA movement was kind of that initially, right? That's what the Tea Party was. It was just that was also backed by a massive funding operation by the Kochs and others. And so, I think it's really important for people to think about that quote in the current moment. I mean, it hasn't changed much, but now we're starting to see stuff move from, what has traditionally been kind of stochastic networks to this more surrogate action, whether that's online or not. And it looks like that insurgency.
Yeah. And it definitely reflects a lot of where we're at when we hear stories like this. We hear stories about, Jaime Garcia and they finally killed somebody, and it makes anyone with a conscience incredibly mad and frustrated. And I think that's part of why they do it. I mean, like I said earlier, they view us as the enemy, and breaking the enemy's morale is something that is a huge part of warfighting.
That is how you win.
This is a war. This is a war for them. And when you're really frustrated and angry, you can't take any direct action that's going to solve the problem or even make things any better. You feel like they're winning. You feel very overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And one thing a lot of people do when they're feeling frustrated and overwhelmed these days is they get on the internet and they post about it. And that's fine. You cannot keep all of this bottled up if you're going to spend as much time being, in that sphere. At some point, you got to have a way to relax and let it out. But here's the really important part. You got to be aware these people now have the data collection capabilities to record everything you say. And even if you think your social media profile is anonymous, it probably isn't to Palantir. Maybe it's not going to get you doxxed by chuds, but having Peter Thiel's information vampires after you is a whole different level, and you got to be aware of that. So you really want to be careful about saying certain things in public, specifically anything that might be taken as a threat or an invocation to violence, because the people who control that bureaucracy now are not on your side. And you are,
and in fact, like, they're actively looking for reasons to come after you, right?
You're the kind of people they're rounding up data on.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've been talking to a few of the people that I know who are more on the activist side is just the reality that, like, most of these lists that Palantir and some of the other companies are starting to compile are coming from literal neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, if you've ever been on Antifa Watch, member of Antifa Watch list here, I know you are as well, and I know some others that we regularly talk with on here are, that's already been fed to them. Right? And, like, the info they have on Antifa Watch isn't good info.
No, it's
but it
terrible
is info. It's not usually accurate, but that's the thing, right?
It's a starting point.
It's going to be, this is going to get much, much more pinpointed. And what we've seen with places like New Orleans now and outside of the country, in Palestine specifically, is these companies coming in and kind of be setting up these systems to test them.
Yeah.
And like New Orleans, this stuff that's come out now about this Friends of New Orleans or whatever group it is running facial recognition software that's technically against the law, but because it's not the cops doing it, they just share it in real time with the cops, is the way around this, right? So, like, there are secondary and third tier things happening with this data collection that if you make a even joking threat, you are going to put yourself and everyone around you in a situation that is so risky that it is not even remotely worth it.
Right.
And with what we're seeing right now, specifically what you and I and others are starting to see, and some real good data is being put out about now on Blue Sky specifically, there's a pretty concerted effort by bad actors to get people to say really gnarly things.
I mean, and this isn't new to anybody who's been around a while, but a lot of the time, some of the people who are the loudest and mouthiest about what should be done about these horrible ICE agents coming to our communities tend to be working at a desk at Department of Homeland Security. And
literally, or some fusion center
somewhere.
Yeah.
And they're hoping you'll get caught up in this and, maybe give it a like or a retweet, and bingo, this is where the term Fedposting comes from, And anybody that posts on the internet calling for violence or escalation just might be a Fed looking to make lists. And it's very easy not to get caught up in this, people. Thankfully, we have one weird trick that we use not to get caught up in this, and it's don't post violent threats on the internet or interact with anyone who does.
And literally don't...
One weird trick.
Don't make fucking threats. The easiest thing you can do to keep yourself safe is do not make explicit threats. Don't make any threats.
Don't make threats.
Don't do it. Just don't do it. It's really easy to keep yourself safe in this situation when you don't do the thing that puts you in danger.
Right.
So don't say it. And when someone asks you, what kind of direct action do you think is needed? You don't respond. You don't respond. I get literally, I have a running list of people, literally, who come into my responses on Blue Sky week after week sometimes to try and get a response on what do you mean when you say that nonviolence isn't the sole way that you fight fascism. I've been very clear about what that means, right? That there are a diversity of things, whether that's nonviolent protests coupled with larger direct actions, whatever these things are. What you don't do is you do not respond to someone saying, well, what bit of violence do you want to do today? You just don't answer.
Especially if that account is like some anonymous account.
Well, when it's literally Johnny Appleseed 44964, American patriot, anti-fascist. Who do you think that is?
Right.
Really? Like just because it says anti-fascist in bio, we've run into this before.
To entrap people too.
Literally,
So, anybody who's been around for a while knows about COINTELPRO. Anybody who's studied the
Yes.
history of the FBI knows about COINTELPRO. And here's a quick refresher in case you're new.
yes,
COINTELPRO,
literally, this
yeah.
is laid out in their paper.
This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is something that's been absolutely documented to death. It is the Federal Bureau of Investigation's counterintelligence program. And it involves things like agents provocateurs who show up and say things very loudly about how someone should really do something about it. And wouldn't you know, they just happen to know somebody who knows where to get weapons or dynamite or wherever. This is the same program they've used in the past against the KKK, against Black and Latino radicals, environmental and animal rights activists, and anyone
all of them
that the government considers to be a threat. And get this through your head right now. This government considers you to be a threat. This administration
all of us are a
thinks you're a
threat.
threat.
Yeah, all of us are a threat to the fascist plan.
And if you're listening to this show, you just might be on a list. And they're making a lot of lists these days.
I would assume every one of us, whether or not we're the ones talking on this show or the ones consuming it, probably are.
Yeah.
Okay. But don't add to that list by giving them a reason.
Right.
And you know, for a lot of people, like, people forget that in 2016 and all the way through until now, but really 2016, 17, 18, there was a huge push by accounts on Twitter, for example, saying they were anti-fascist accounts, being really looking like they were either Anti-Fascist Action, Torch Network, any of the big groups that were doing it at that point. But they weren't.
Nope.
They were literal Nazis and fascist trolls trying to get people to do things or say things that then could be pointed to either as Antifa terrorists in their little screen cap competitions, or they were outrage farming, or they were trying to get people to, you know,
commit to something that would get them actually in trouble.
Exactly. And like, in heightened moments of tension where people are scared, where there's an hugely ambiguous things happening, whether that's in the past, we'd talk about terrorist attacks or, you know, climate disasters or these things. This is where this runs rampant. Right now, the government is an ambiguity machine. It is amping, it is making things totally unrecognizable in the way that we normally do. So what does that lead to? It leads to conspiracy and people getting really highly agitated.
Yep.
And for bad actors, that environment is incredibly powerful because it does allow them then a small inroad to get people to do things that they might not otherwise, whether that's just saying something or acting on something. And that is where you get into real trouble. And we're not going to, like, they are not going to need much to tip that over into everything from RICO style actions, as we're already seeing them do with some of these charges in federal court, saying that people who are distributing masks, for example, are committing a federal crime when they're distributing masks at protests. And I'm not talking like garters, like the guys who are disappearing people into vans are wearing. I'm saying surgical masks.
Yeah.
And
the guy
so
in
like
LA that just got arrested for that.
Exactly. And this is the thing, right? Like, there's been a groundwork established for treating this now as terrorism. When you get to a point that comprehensive lists are being made, we know they're enemies lists, but we also don't exactly understand how they're being done. And we understand that every one of us is an enemy to this project. You get into a place where it's very, very quickly from, well, I was joking, to now every one of your friends is getting knocked on their door.
Right. And the difference now, I would say, between Hoover's FBI, where this stuff was developed, and what we're seeing now is that they simply have the big data capability to sift through any number of pieces of information about you at the click of a button. It's very easy for them to track you down and come up with an idea of exactly who you are and, you know, what you think about one thing and another.
And they're doing that across the timeline, right?
Yeah,
like, this isn't something that's just it's not just this one moment, it's back in time as well.
Right.
So like if 10 years ago you got popped for, let's say, selling weed, right? That's gonna pop up in their search, right? Have you had any interaction with cops ever?
Yeah.
Whether that is you calling them or them showing up to talk to you or just on the street.
Mhm.
All of this stuff now, it's not just your social media. And I think that that's the thing that people need to understand. Like,
Right.
as much as we like to, as the government would like us to believe up until recently that they had this kind of omnipresent capability, they didn't.
Right.
The FBI definitely had different tools. The federal government has tools to do this more omnipresent work. But now, this would be more akin to the social credit score system in China, except now it's tied to a fascist disappearance mechanism.
Yeah.
And that's a major difference, in one that like gets talked about, but not enough now, in the kind of shut the fuck up Friday kind of way that we have to talk about it, right?
Exactly.
Like, where it's just, certain things, I'll never tell anyone not to speak because I don't believe in that, but people do need to understand that the risk for even normal speech now is getting higher.
And everybody out there, us included, needs to be, like you said, extremely cautious about what we say in public, and social media is public. And there are conversations that should only be had offline. And then there are conversations that should only be had offline in a remote location after everyone who is in attendance has been searched for electronic devices. But it's very much a case of like, just think a little bit. Does this need to be discussed right now? Or is this something that would be better off discussed in a more secure environment?
Well, and there's the other part where it's just like, is that conversation useful?
Right.
In all seriousness, like, is that conversation useful? And if it's not, it might not be worth having, regardless of where you are, regardless of if your cell phones are locked in a fridge in a different room.
Right.
The reality is, like, we're not at a point in this country where we are going to do the thing that a lot of people, I think, are starting to get scared of, because it's more and more real. We're not there yet.
No,
we're not there yet, and that's good. We don't want to be there. But the reality is, when people get to a point where that's their concern, people act.
Right.
And it hasn't been covered much in the big news, but some people in Texas did act against ICE.
Mm-hmm.
And people did something that I think a lot of people have been both concerned would happen, but also there's a growing view that might be the right way.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone right now can get to the point where that action was without understanding that they're going after those guys in a way that I don't know if I've ever seen.
No, but this is a new version of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
This is you hate to use the phrase because it's cliche, but this is COINTELPRO on steroids.
It is. And it's also, the other part of that is this level of COINTELPRO in a police state is a different thing. And what, I think the thing that we're all kind of dancing around here, because the word is so loaded, because it's been so used by the far right in bullshit propaganda, misinformation, and conspiratorial kind of ways, they're building a police state.
They are.
And these comprehensive lists, what we're talking about with not being caught up in these digital and physical dragnets, is a police state.
Yeah.
And I have really wrestled with this one because it is a really loaded term, but I think we have to really get comfortable using that term, because that's what this is. And we shouldn't forget that, even though we do need to also really remember that they are going to try and goad you into putting yourself in a position where you get in trouble.
Right. And you don't want that. You don't want this level of trouble. You want to be able to stay in this as long as you possibly can. And you cannot do that if you have been arrested for saying stupid things on the internet, and you cannot do that if you have been compromised because somebody came to you with a screenshot of some stupid shit you said on the internet and said, guess what?
Right. And that's ultimately the thing that I think about a lot is like, this is a coercive regime. This is a coercive fascist movement. And so if you do get popped, there is a likelihood they are going to ask you to be part of it or disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one that people aren't ready for yet, right? Where people they have known and trusted now are not that person anymore. And it's because they said something online or in person that suddenly opened them up to coercion at the state level.
Yeah. And they fully, absolutely run this play. So if that's something that you want to avoid, again, we have one weird trick here at Did Nothing Wrong that we use to avoid it, and that's called shut the fuck up.
Yeah. It's some of the best advice ever uttered by an attorney online.
Shut the fuck up.
Is the guys who came up with Shut the Fuck Up Friday, because it's true.
It's the one thing that can't get you in worse trouble. It's the one thing you can say or not say that can't get you in worse trouble. It is shut the fuck up. And that applies to not only direct interactions, but indirect actions like Blue Sky. Shut the fuck up.
100%. 100%. There's going to be a growing push to get people to either act or say they're going to act as this gets weirder, because the far right needs there to be a boogeyman that isn't just people being like, yo, we're getting shot at by cops.
Right.
Because that actually, in the US, funny enough, there is a pretty large group of people who literally look at that and are like, oh, well, the cops are in the wrong. And that's 99.999% of the time right. And so if your propaganda doesn't work, you have to manufacture it. And the best way to manufacture it is get a lot of people to do it for them. And to manage that and to justify this to their own base, which seems to be increasingly hard when looking at the numbers coming out.
Right.
This massive swing that we saw in these polling numbers on immigration this weekend, that indicates that they're losing this propaganda war, even though they're waging a ground war against people they perceive as their enemy. And that historically doesn't end well. So they're going to have, there is going to have to be some level of manufacturing, either through this kind of illicit stuff where you get people to say stuff so you can screen cap it and bring it back to Fox News or Twitter, or the kind where they can start to point and say, we arrested 65 people in a, quote, terrorist ring online because one of them said this and 64 others just happened to like it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there you go. That's what they're going for these days. That's the play. So as a person who does not want to get caught up in that, as a free citizen, as free as you can be at this point in the game, your goal and the thing that you got to remember is you don't have to justify yourself to some anonymous account on a social media site. Somebody comes in and asks you a bunch of questions, you can block and ignore that person, and you probably should.
And in fact, you should.
Just
it is,
it's liberating.
Just do it.
Just because somebody with an anonymous profile avatar of Resist 314, AK, whatever, decides they have
AKA John Brown's ghost.
John Brown did nothing wrong or whatever. It's like, look, you don't need to explain that to that person. Shut the fuck up. Just mute them, block them, move on, let them go crazy.
Yeah. And just remember, like, they will classify memes as a threat. So just don't post pictures of Ethan Hawke, like wearing a bomb vest, like I keep seeing from people who say that they're anti-fascist. Don't do that shit. Like,
it's dumb.
Don't just you being edgy online at one point was fine. It's putting you and your friends at risk. The old like that, the internet joke of like the few pictures of the guy being like, this is what I posted, and then being like, wow, this looks terrible on a piece of paper when it's handed back to you by, DHS. Yeah. You don't want that. You do really not want that.
You don't want your tweets being read back to you in court. You don't want to hear any of these conversations. And the best way to deal with this is to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Just don't.
just don't do it. And frankly, like, this is where that community aspect that we've talked about and the resilience of community comes in. Go talk to your friends.
Exactly.
Like, don't go talk to them about how you know, X, Y, or Z thing, but like, just go get out of that space for a little bit.
Sure.
You don't need to, you know, the same thing I said about around consuming all of the worst images coming out of Gaza. You don't need to witness the atrocities every second of every day to be in the fight. And in fact, to stay in the fight, and this is coming from someone now who is consciously taking time offline.
Yeah.
That's the way you stay in it. And this is a marathon now, and it's going to have some sprints in it. It might even turn into a little bit of a triathlon.
Sure.
We want you with us when we survive this and we get the chance to do the better thing at the end of this, which means you got to pace yourself. And that means shut the fuck up.
We want to see you at the after party.
We do, in fact.
Do.
Because the after party is going to be
lit.
Good.
Fucking
yeah.
lit.
As the kids say, it's going to be fucking lit. And reestablishing, rebuilding democracy in the way that we will have to when this is done.
And that it should have been done in the first place.
And should have been done from day one. Yeah, it's hard work, but you know what? That's the biggest party you're ever going to be a part of.
And we're going to need all of you on the board for that. So please listen to what we're saying to you right now and shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Go read theory about it. Like, it's the one time I'm actually going to say that, because a lot of you have read a lot of theory.
Yes.
A lot of people have read too much fucking theory.
It's possible.
Go read a book.
Yeah.
Like, just go do something else. You don't need to witness it, and you sure as shit do not need to put yourself in a position of danger.
Go for
just
a
because
walk. Go volunteer somewhere.
Yeah. Go find a local group that is working to the same goal you have, because ultimately that is much more powerful than you posting a shitty meme that suddenly has a DHS agent knocking at your door about.
Exactly.